Good evening. Good evening. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. So,
good evening.
Hi. Oh, yes, I can see people who were on the course today. Hi, Debbie. Hi. I will ask you to mute your microphones, please, although I love hearing your voices, but when we have big groups, even one unmuted microphone can create quite a lot of disruption. So please just mute them for now. And as always, I will ask you to write in the chat box a little bit about yourself and where you are in the world, where are you joining us from, and how did you hear about us? Is it your first SDS Thursday, or you've attended some before, or maybe you've attended some training with us, maybe today, maybe last year? So anything you find relevant, and say hello to your fellow participants, because if we can't have our microphones unmuted, then at least we can say hello to each other in the chat box. That'll be nice. As you know, probably, my name is Dr. Julia Budnik, and I'm one of the directors of SDS Seminars. And today we will have quite an unusual SDS Thursday, because for the first time since the beginning of the first lockdown, Paul Grantham is joining us from a different location. So he is attending a European CBT conference in Belfast. And very kindly, he said, I will still go ahead with SDS Thursday. And he is balancing his laptop on top of his suitcase to join us today. So it's very, very good of him, and probably he'll give us a couple of pointers about CBT conference in Belfast. But it is it's sort of sign of improvement in our life, I guess, if we can start attending conferences. I'm still admitting people in, so letting them in, and therefore will not start with a formal presentation, but I want to take the chance, as I always do, to take you onto SDS website and let you know about the events which are coming up, and about this particular event, which Paul will be talking about today. So as always, to get on SDS website, you type in skillsdevelopment.co.uk, or you just do a search SDS seminars, and we will be right on top of your search, and you go on to the menu all courses, and you choose the view, calendar view. So we don't have that many events running in September. So we've got CBT introductory course, which is already fully booked. And I'll mention again that the next CBT introductory course, which still has places available, will be running in February. So if anybody's interested in CBT introductory course, please have a look at February course. Then we're running Working with Perfectionism. Somebody's microphone is unmuted. Can we please mute all microphones? Thank you. So then we're doing Working with Perfectionism, which is part of our certificate in BPS approved certificate in non-diagnostic categories, or working with common life challenges. So we had Thursday on perfectionism last week, and we're sort of logically continuing today with procrastination, because as Paul mentioned, procrastination is actually quite common for people with perfectionism, and also quite common for people with imposter syndrome, and many of you have attended imposter syndrome. So this full seminar on procrastination will run in October, and it is one of the only module of that certificate which runs for 2 days. So I Want to Stop Procrastinating Now is a full 2 days program. 13th and 14th of October, it will be running. And it is a program which Paul has developed actually quite a few years ago. And it's already been tried and tested on people and proven to be very effective. So this 2-day seminar is suitable both for clients, for work with clients, and also for yourself, for working with yourself and dealing with procrastination issues which you might be suffering yourself. So 13th and 14th of October, I want to stop procrastinating now, will be this particular event. And now I will stop. I'm not procrastinating, actually. I'm doing well, but I will stop talking and will pass microphone to Paul in Belfast, who will take us through tonight's presentation. Paul, please.
Thanks very much, Julia. Good evening, folks. I'm here in my hotel room, and I'm actually I'm actually missing the first half of the party that is part of the conference here this evening, in order to have the much more positive experience, I'm sure, of joining you and sharing with you some of the work that I've been doing on procrastination, and which is going to be opened up into a large 2-day course next month, as Julia actually mentioned. Just briefly on the conference here, can I say that, first of all, it's a real novelty and also a pleasure to have face-to-face contact with so many people. That's an interesting experience in itself. But the content's been really interesting as well. Not surprisingly, there's been a lot of workshops and also papers on the whole issue of dealing with uncertainty. Obviously, primarily within the context of COVID, but it's also got broader applicability as well. So really, it's been an interesting set of issues, and also been on a workshop today on dealing with shame, and also one on diversity as well. They've been good. They've been great papers so far. But let me just leave that and move across to what we're looking at here today. So let me share my screen across to this PowerPoint. Okay, which hopefully you can see okay. Can I just make a couple of points about this? I hope this is going to come through okay. For some reason, my hotel Wi-Fi is not connecting very well to my laptop, so I'm using my mobile as a hotspot. I hope that's going to be sufficient. But also, in addition to that, I'm going to be running a short video really on this to begin with, which again is on the laptop. I hope it's going to come through for you okay. But if you've got particular issues with it, can I just say that the video is available elsewhere on the SDS website, which I'm sure details are going to be available to you. So if I can just say a little bit about the background to this, which is that I got involved with looking at the issue of procrastination probably about 5 years ago in the first instance. I was particularly dissatisfied, I think I wanted to say, with what was largely being offered to folk in terms of handling procrastination. And in many quarters, I think procrastination has been largely seen as a time management issue, and the solution to it are time management skills. And I think that is highly inaccurate, in fact, and I'll say a little bit about why that's the case in a minute. And it also explains, I think, why I have had over the years, and I suspect you have as well, so many clients who procrastinate. It may not be their presenting problem at all, but it comes through time and time again. You know, whether you are doing work with them and for those of you working within a CBT modality, you give them some homework to do and they procrastinate over whether they're going to do that, whether people are grappling with life decisions, should I do A or B, and they procrastinate over the dilemma, and so on and so forth. And certainly everything at the time that I was really seeing in the literature, I felt didn't really address it. So that's how I sort of got involved with it. So I wanted to sort of just start off by saying a little bit about the nature of the problem. And I've actually got a short video here, which is actually promotional for the course, but hopefully you can forgive that in order to get some sort of flavor of the sorts of issues and the size of the problem and the nature of it, and some of the issues that I will be getting to grips with, really, with regards to dealing with this particular problem on our 2 days. So hopefully this will be fine.
Hi, I'm Paul Grantham, consultant clinical psychologist and director of SDS seminars. Today I want to talk to you about procrastination. Procrastination is a near universal experience. Research suggests that up to 90% of the population suffers from it, and that 20 to 25% experience it as a serious chronic problem. Just so you're clear on the figures here, that's about 10 million people in the UK, 60 million in the US, and 160 million people across the whole of Europe. This problem doesn't seem to vary much culturally either. The percentages are roughly the same whether you're talking about Turkey or Germany. And incidentally, I'm only talking about the adult population here. Children who procrastinate over their schoolwork are a whole different group. But why worry about it though? Maybe you think that people ought to be more chilled and put things off more as a matter of course. But here's the rub. Extensive research has demonstrated that chronic procrastinators are the exact opposite of chilled. They may talk about being chilled. They may try to convince themselves and you that they're chilled. They undoubtedly would love to be chilled. But the reality is that they're typically extremely stressed. Stressed by the worry about what they haven't yet done, stressed by the hassle that they get from other people, stressed by their sense of failure and indecision. But what about that old favorite that I need to leave things to the last moment in order to get motivated? This is based on the highly selective application of the belief that our mood has to match our behavioral intention in order for us to actually take action. If this was really true, we'd never brush our teeth until the very last moment we had to. We'd never put the rubbish out until it really stank. In fact, we'd never do anything until we really had to. Now, of course, there are some people who are like this, but even the worst procrastinators usually don't do it. There are lots of things that we do where we don't have to feel like doing them in order to do them. Procrastination doesn't just lead to stress. Research has demonstrated that chronic procrastinators are also more vulnerable to a range of other mental health problems, such as depression, anxiety, guilt, and panic. Close behind these, and maybe not surprisingly, alcohol and cigarette consumption often appears to increase in chronic procrastinators, as well as difficulties sleeping. Bearing in mind such processes, there's been an increasing amount of research on the impact of procrastination on physical health. Firstly, who's never been guilty of putting off going to the gym or starting to eat more healthily? The problem with this type of procrastination, of course, is that because there's no immediate deadline, for some, it becomes a hidden behavioral health problem, silently ticking away until cardiovascular problems become visible in the form of hypertension, heart attacks, and stroke. Research by Dr. Fuchsia Sirois has demonstrated that chronic procrastinators are particularly vulnerable to developing such problems. Firstly, procrastinating stress has a measurable effect on our immune systems, exactly the same process that increases our proneness to colds and flu. Secondly, we delay in engaging in health behaviors. And finally, to compound things further, we typically delay seeking medical help, despite the health warnings experienced. If all of this wasn't bad enough, procrastination has big implications for our career and productivity. Procrastinators often blame others for their failure to get things done. Do you ever find yourself saying, if only I didn't have so much to do? This, of course, sits quite illogically with any tendency to leave everything which is boring or difficult until the last moment. Again, we now know that procrastination is strongly correlated with poor academic success, independent of ability. That it can take up to a quarter of someone's working day and has been estimated to cost employers around $10,000 a year per employee. Generally speaking, there's also a strong correlation between chronic procrastination and salary when compared with peers. Equally, it seems that those who have more control over their time seem to be the ones that are most likely to procrastinate. White-collar professionals, salespeople, and the self-employed are much more vulnerable than blue-collar workers and middle managers, for instance. So what's to be done? The traditional way of trying to tackle procrastination is to view it as a time management problem. If only individuals knew how to prioritize and organize their work better, then procrastination wouldn't exist. There's only one problem with this approach, however. It doesn't work. Time management programs alone have repeatedly shown that they have a very limited impact on the behavior of procrastinators. People learn the skills, but when it comes down to it, they don't apply them in a way that stops procrastination. I want to stop procrastinating now.com uses a totally different approach derived from the science of second and third wave cognitive behavior therapy, combined with key findings within the social and cognitive psychology fields. It starts off from the premise that procrastination is due to uncomfortable feelings intolerance, or UFI. This is largely maintained through negative reinforcement and the role of unhelpful beliefs and assumptions that either prevent action or alternatively are used as post hoc excuses for inaction. Through the implementation of the 6-stage I Want to Stop Procrastinating Now program, participants become liberated to do the most challenging, boring, or most off-putting of tasks. Not because it helps them to adore them, but because it helps them to separate their behavior from their feelings and provides an essential research-based secret source that boosts them to take action. Whatever you're procrastinating about, work or academic tasks, life, health, or work decisions, or just struggling to get things done, have a look at iwanttostopprocrastinatingnow.com. By helping you to make your tomorrow today, it's your first step towards a more fulfilled, liberated, and productive life.
Right. Can you see the PowerPoint again? Yeah. Okay. Forgive that slightly promotional tone at the end there, folks. If I can just say a bit about the program that I developed. And as I said, originally in its original form was started off really about 4 years ago now. It has been operating as a treatment program. There's a self-help workbook that's going to be coming out next month as well with the same title. And obviously there's the 2-day training course, which has been approved by the BPS, which is going to be running next month as well. So it's been developed over this period of time and has been fine-tuned. So nearly 300 clients have actually completed the therapy course, but it's running for the first time in its finalized training version, as I say, next month. And it's based on something called the muscle technique. Now, the muscle technique is something which actually doesn't just have applicability, I think, to procrastination, but procrastination is the bedrock on which it's actually being founded. So it's a series of component parts that are put together as a program. Some of these have been changed over that particular period of time, largely on the basis of feedback from clients, and it's in its final form now. And it's an integrated CBT approach, which draws on first, second, and third wave CBT strategies and ideas, along with something which maybe some of you may or may not have heard of, which is self-determination theory, and also some ideas from motivational interviewing as well. So the muscle technique is a heuristic and a mnemonic, which stands for the following. It stands for motivate, uncomfortable feelings, intolerance, spotting unhelpful thoughts and beliefs, changing those, and learning Gollwitz's if-then technique, which I'll say something briefly about at the moment, and finally engage. So if I can just take you through each of these steps, I will argue quite strongly that for people who typically chronically procrastinate over things, this is very, very akin to an addictive behavior. And I think that's one of the key reasons, incidentally, that a skills-based approach doesn't work. Because actually, at the end of the day, there's a whole issue here about how motivated the actual person is to take action. So that's where this program actually starts. It starts with identifying negative consequences or benefits of action or inaction, and then basically helping the person to amplify those in order to move them out of their comfort zone. And within the particular program, there are 3 specific exercises that are used to identify and amplify those particular things in order to increase motivation, in order to tackle procrastination. So the motivation bit on this is something that we found is really important in terms of getting people moving. You can't just go straight in and attempt to tackle the problem. UFI. So the idea here is, and this is really central, I think, to procrastination. If you think about the things that you do or your clients do when they procrastinate, they go and check the fridge, they go and read emails, they go and surf the web, they go and surf different TV channels. It's often suggested that people who do this do it because they are unable to delay pleasure. In other words, they've got to have it now. And that's the reason why they procrastinate. They can't tolerate, things that are boring, and they can't wait for their fun. The reality is, in my opinion, is that actually no one would ever think about the idea of surfing the web or reading emails or checking what's in the fridge as something which is joyful. In other words, I would argue quite strongly that when people procrastinate, they don't do things that give them pleasure. What they do is they engage in activities that take away bad feelings. So I got this particular idea, as I'm sure some of you must probably realize, from the idea of discomfort tolerance and discomfort intolerance in DBT, but I didn't want to use that term distress, because I think in a sense it exaggerates it. It's just about feeling uncomfortable. It's about looking at a computer screen when you're trying to write an essay and feeling bored. It's about sitting there looking at that screen and thinking, not quite sure where to start on this. It's an exaggeration to call this distress, but it is an uncomfortable feeling. And the thing that I think is really, really important to recognize is that uncomfortable feeling is taken away immediately by the procrastinating activity. And that's what makes it so addictive. Now, the reality is, of course, is that how do you deal with uncomfortable feelings? And the brief answer is some form of exposure. So, we know this from the whole idea of going to the gym or using an exercise metaphor here. You go and do some exercise the first time and my God, it's unpleasant. And you think, oh God, that was horrific, etc. But actually, the whole process of repetition and exposure to that makes it easier. And indeed, in many instances, it gets to a point where either you don't think anything at all about it, or you may actually see it as pleasurable. The other example I've got here, which is called lumps of blood, actually comes from our son, who, when he was about 5 or 6, we were on a holiday in France, and basically he slipped over in some gravel. And he came in quite distressed by this and was saying, look, lumps of blood. And he, at the time, had never been a particularly sort of rough and tumble kid. But what was really interesting was his exposure to lumps of blood actually changed his attitude towards them. So he saw the fact that it hadn't killed him. Then he started getting quite fascinated about it, got quite fascinated by, as a lot of kids do, by the scab. And then he became quite fascinated about peeling it off. And what was really interesting was that actually by the end of the holiday, he was using climbing frames and slides in a way which he hadn't been doing before. So in a sense, that exposure element is what enabled him in many ways to get over that. So that whole idea of developing uncomfortable feeling tolerance in order to overcome UFI is something which is also looked at within the course. And again, there are 4 specific exercises with lots of practice as well that you go through in this particular course in order to address that. As you probably guessed here, the course is very hot on doing. You know, this is a course which I think in many ways was developed and put in the forefront of my mind that people need help in terms of putting things into practice. It's all very easy to go on any sort of course or to go and sit in with a therapist and hear some interesting ideas, but actually not to change your behavior. And there's a big emphasis within this course about doing that. So one of the things I use, for instance, in the course, as I also use with clients, is the use of follow-up texting after the course is actually finished to provide reminders about putting things into practice. SPOT stands for Spotting Unhelpful Beliefs and Thoughts. And this, in some ways, you might say, oh, this sounds like sort of bog standard CBT. You know, and at one level it is. I think one of the things that's quite interesting about procrastination is the wide range of different types of unhelpful beliefs and thoughts that people actually experience when they procrastinate. I've just got a short selection here of some of the ones that, in my opinion, are most pertinent. And I guess for any of you working in the addictions field, you will actually see some similarities here with some of this type of thinking and the sort of thinking that crops up with substance misuse. Permission giving thoughts. I've got so much else. I've got so much on. I'll actually leave this until later. I'm giving myself express permission. Righteous rejection thoughts. It should be Fred that's doing this, not me. It's unfair. Minimizing thoughts. This won't take much time to do. I'll do it later. And then there are some broader beliefs about self, such as, you know, I don't deserve to succeed. So I'll just leave it because I'm not actually sure whether I want to manage this or not, or simply that I'm pathetic or I'm a failure. I mean, one of the things that we know, again, particularly from the addictions field, is that there is a strong relationship between a lot of these types of thoughts and what are called urges, which in turn lead to behavior. And this is very, very common when we procrastinate. You know, we have that thought that, you know, it won't take much time to do. I'll leave it until a bit later. That creates the urge in me to leave things, and then I leave them. So within this particular program, we've got a particular section which gives the opportunity for a self-assessment exercise, particularly to identify the particular types of thought that are most pertinent for you in terms of procrastinating. And I think one of the things that, for me, that's come through over the years with working with clients on this is that which of these types of thoughts actually play the biggest role actually is quite variable. And it's a key reason why some form of self-assessment is really important. And also we spend some time as well looking at how to make a decision about what cognitive focus to have. You know, if there are a range of different thoughts that tend to coincide with procrastinating, how do you decide which ones to focus on? So there's some particular guidelines on how to address that. And again, maybe this is self-evident by this particular stage, but I'll say it again. Whether you have a primary interest in this course for yourself, or whether your primary interest is for using it with your clients, I strongly believe that with this particular issue, I think that everybody who's going to be using it with clients needs to have the experience of applying the particular program to themselves. So to put it bluntly, even if you're not a procrastinator, that is why this particular program has got so much emphasis on you taking yourself through this, not just to see how it works, because the reality is, of course, is that we can all of us probably improve in what we do with regards to whether we do things when we should be doing them. But I think also to get some sense as well of some of the challenges and obstacles that our clients are actually involved in having to tackle. Change is about changing the cognitions, and this particular section draws on both second and third wave approaches. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this from a CBT perspective, but broadly speaking, what's called second wave CBT tends to concentrate on changing the content of thinking and beliefs. So, you know, if I think to myself, you know, this won't take much time, then it's about changing the content of that particular thought. Third wave is arguably about changing our relationship or perspective on the particular thoughts we have. In fact, it's not the thought per se, which in a sense causes problems for us. It's our relationship with that thought. It's the fact that we fuse with it. We treat it as the truth. I'm sure a number of you are aware of that common CBT saying or a piece of advice, which is don't believe everything you think. And actually, our problems are often because we do believe what it is that we think. So we've got a sort of dual strategy here that draws on second and third wave. And also I wanted to have something here as well about why changing thinking is actually easier than you think it is. I think a lot of people say, yeah, I know how my thinking creates problems for me, but changing the way in which I think is not easy. Well, I wanted to provide you with an exercise and a route to enable both you and your clients that you work with some evidential experience, basically, that changing thinking is actually a lot easier than you think. So not surprisingly, this is quite a big component within this particular program. So there are 6 separate exercises that are within the program that enable change in cognitions and which are also going to be involving quite a bit of practice. Now, the learn part relates to learning something called implementation intentions, or what is commonly called the if-then technique. Now, this is developed by a psychologist called Gollwitzer. And what I think amazes me about this is that given its excellent research and evidence base, it hasn't become more widely known, and probably, in my opinion, most strikingly, has not been incorporated as a matter of course in the vast majority of therapies that people get engaged in. And there is good outcome evidence about its very positive role with regards to weight loss, increasing student study, which is obviously a big procrastinating issue. And it's also been found to increase outcomes using exposure therapy with regards to phobias and disgust problems. And if you want to know about how much difference it makes, and I will say something about the evidence base for this briefly, for those of you that come along to the program, is that it doubles the success rate of personal behavior change. I mean, that I would say is striking. And there's very few, I think, ideas in the behavior and attitude change field that have got such a good research base. In a sense, whatever it is that you want to help people to change. So it's a 5-stage technique, which again, you will learn within the particular two-day program, and also which you'll have an opportunity to practice and to actually see yourself the difference it makes. The E in the muscle technique is about engaging. And that's really about the whole question of dealing with what, for me, has been an issue of fascination for years, which is the question of maintenance. I've been interested, as many of you know, I've been interested in the whole question of what motivates clients to change and the problems that they have with getting motivated to get their act together or to do things, or in many instances, even to recognize they have a problem that can be addressed or should be addressed. But actually, the one area which there's really still very little work on is the whole question of maintenance and relapse prevention. And I'm forever drawn back to the quotation from Bob Newhart, the American comedian, who once said, "Giving up cigarette smoking is very easy. I have done it on many occasions." And that whole idea that actually getting motivated to take action is one thing, but maintaining change is a totally different issue. So I wanted to have something within the I Want to Stop Procrastinating Now program, which basically enables people who go through it to integrate any changes into their life in such a way that those changes are maintained. So there's a number of simple steps with this. There's the question of how you're going to remember, well, it's a very simple first step, how you're going to remember what it is that you've learned in order to overcome procrastination. It's just so easy, isn't it, to just think to yourself, actually, at the end of the day, that's useful, I'll use it sometime, which of course is a classic procrastinating response. So how are you going to remember to actually do it? How are you going to integrate it into your life? And we've got a few particular techniques and exercises there, which have got a good evidence base to actually help you do that. And I lay a particular emphasis on an area that I've had a lot of interest in for ages now, in terms of dealing with the maintenance problem, which is the development of routines, habits, and rituals. Now, habits are often seen as a bad thing, in inverted commas, but can I just emphasize here that there's lots of things that we do on a regular basis, which, to be honest with you, we do not find exciting. They may even be a big hassle, but somehow or other we do them, and we may not even need to remember the fact we do them. We just do them automatically. Teeth brushing is an obvious example of this. And we know that routines are important for this, but also rituals are important. And brushing teeth, by the way, is a classic example of ritual, about, the way you put toothpaste on the brush, whether you use a hand or an electric toothbrush, the brand of toothpaste you use, when during the day you do it, how you consume water before or afterwards, and so on and so forth. All of these are rituals, and we know that rituals can be extraordinarily helpful. So you'll be learning some of those as well within that particular program. So folks, that's all I really wanted to, I guess, say about this, apart from to remind you, of course, that the full program, which obviously outlines this in more detail, is going to be running on the 13th and 14th of October. That's the link in order to join up for it if you want. We are going to have limited places on this, not surprisingly, because we're going to have an opportunity for practice work, so that has an implication for how many people we can actually take on. But I hope you're going to feel stimulated enough from this evening to come and join me, really, because I can say that you will be joining hundreds of people who have already experienced it therapeutically, and where I hope that you can see a role for this, either for yourself or alternatively for the clients that you actually work with, where procrastination plays either a role as the presenting problem, or alternatively a role in terms of making their current difficulties that they're seeing you for worse. So I will stop the share at that particular point, folks, and yeah, I'll pass you back over to Julia.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. it is fascinating. And what is very interesting is that you mentioned in the beginning that the muscle technique can be useful not just for procrastination, but for many other behavioral changes. And actually, what we don't often see as procrastination, but it is a procrastination behavior, is the whole host of health-related behavior. As you mentioned, cigarette smoking, alcohol consumption, food consumption, obesity, all these issues, they are classic procrastination issues, aren't they? I'll start tomorrow, I will do it later, and things like that. So it is incredibly applicable to a very wide variety of issues. We have questions here, and I'll just answer a couple of questions which are technical. Whether we will be running this course again. At this particular moment in time, we don't have future dates, but it's possible that we will run it in a year time. But at the moment, if you want to participate in this course, and especially if you are on the certificate for non-diagnostic problems, then please try to come in October, because waiting a year is another procrastination technique probably for the course. Also, the question about the book. I am editing Paul's book right now, and we've got the first draft printed, and it will be coming, I hope, before the course. It should come in the beginning of October, and it will have this muscle technique and exercises in it. But it's still not an alternative to the course, because obviously going through the course with Paul and doing all these techniques together with your colleagues will enable you to gain a greater depth of understanding. Let me have a look at some questions.
While you're doing that, Julia, can I just say something about the book, because it's something I actually mention in the book. In fact, self-help books don't change people, or more to the point, buying self-help books don't change people. And they certainly don't change people if you buy them and put them on your bookshelf and think, I'll have a look at that sometime. You know, at the end of the day, they only help people to change if they use them. And I was sort of in two minds about the book, because I felt that for some people, the purchase of the book to some extent is used as a procrastinating activity in itself. You know, that you buy the book and you think, oh, I'll have a look. That's really useful, because I you know, there are a few issues about procrastination, either for myself or my clients. I'll have a look at that sometime. And, you know, you will probably, if you're honest with yourself, know whether you're likely to fall into that category on the basis of whether you've already got self-help books on your bookshelf that you've not actually read yet. And if you know that that's the case, well, I can say no more. Obviously, I would love it if you buy the book, but please don't think that buying the book in itself is going to change things. And again, it's one of the reasons, so it's no different for clients, is it? It's no different for clients. And, you know, we need help and support, and we need to, you know, be in an environment where we try things out and actually do things to actually make a change. So sorry, I just wanted to say that briefly.
That's fair enough. Also, people are asking whether they can book on the course and watch the recording. Yes, we now practice that everyone who is booked on the course will always receive a recording on the course, and actually it is indefinite for you to keep and carry on watching. However, it is better to attend this course in person. It's only if you absolutely cannot make it, then yes, go for the recorded version. And I think probably Paul will do some more Thursdays on procrastination in the future, because it's such an interesting topic and really links with many other topics which we'll be covering within this certificate. Paul, there's a couple of questions which were raised during your presentation. When you mentioned that people very often procrastinate in doing activities which are not necessarily pleasurable, they just do them. And Alex asks, what about people who procrastinate on pleasurable activities? I have encountered patients that procrastinate on low effort, high reward leisure activities. So it's, yeah.
Well, my brief answer to that is you may define the activity in that way, but I'll put money on the fact that the client doesn't. And that, can I say, brings us back to the motivation issue. You know, at the end of the day, all human beings only get motivated to do anything if basically they are in a position where they want to get away from something which is unpleasant. And that's the most common motivator, by the way. Or alternatively, if they want to get a benefit that they haven't got. And that is the only thing that moves any human being out of their comfort zone about doing anything. And this is the interesting thing, that judgment is totally subjective. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're not careful, you can fall into the trap of saying, I just don't understand why my client's not doing this. You know, it's straightforward. It will provide them with so many benefits so quickly, and they're not doing it. I don't understand it. Well, the brief answer is their perception of benefits and negative consequences is basically not the same as yours. Now, that doesn't mean to, the patient describes it like this themselves. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I just think, you know, there is a reality here that what it is that people are willing to do is purely determined by those factors. The other thing, I don't want to get too caught up in the question of motivation because it's a whole big area, but I think it's important to bear in mind that what motivates someone to do something is not necessarily the same as what we think they ought to be motivated by, if that makes sense. And I think that, you know, I think that if you're working therapeutically with people, I think you have to accept that people are potentially going to be motivated by things that are different from what you think is the most valuable. The other thing to say, by the way, is don't forget motivation is fluid. You know, people say motivate. I think this is a Zig Ziglar quotation. People say that motivation doesn't last. Neither does teeth brushing. That's why you have to do it every day. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, people's motivation for doing things is fluid. You know, what it is that brought you into your career at the moment or what originally brought you into your career is probably quite different from what it is that gets you up every morning now to do it. You know, motivation is fluid. So don't worry about where people's motivation starts or what it is that starts them off. You know, the key issue is getting going. That's the whole issue with procrastination, is getting going. And that's why we spend so much emphasis, or put so much emphasis on that particular issue right at the very beginning when we're looking at procrastination.
Thank you, Paul. Interesting question from Ian. In what way is procrastination different to avoidance?
It's not, is the brief answer. It's not. And yeah, it is an avoidant behavior. You're quite right. And, you know, with regards to the UFI and with regards to the cognitive components in this, they're both connected with avoidance. You know, the UFI is about largely emotional avoidance. And the cognitive side of it is about avoidance, which in a sense protects the unhelpful belief, which I'm sure if you've got, you know, familiarity with CBT, you'll know what that means. And in fact is one of the key reasons, of course, that people maintain their unhelpful beliefs, because they never get a chance to test them out. And all of this is about, you're quite right, all of this is about avoidance.
Well, it's interesting because probably not all avoidance presents itself as procrastination, but all procrastination is avoidance of something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things, well, can I just say something about this? Because I think this is really interesting, is that, you know, one of the sort of key principles in behavioral theory, is that the proximity of a consequence, in other words, how quickly a consequence occurs following a behavior, is the thing that determines how what powerful effect it has. And the thing I find fascinating about procrastinating is the activities we procrastinate in are actually not that pleasurable. But my God, they take away the bad feelings like that. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that me getting up and checking what's in my fridge, which is hardly the most sort of joyful, pleasurable activity I could engage in, but my goodness, it takes away immediately the boredom or the anxiety that I feel about doing the thing that I need to do. And that makes it very addictive. In that respect, it is just like a drug. It's very addictive indeed. And you know, why is it, I mean, I briefly mentioned this in the video, why is it that some people do this more than others? And the brief answer is, to be honest with you, is a lot of it has to do with how much opportunity you have. And if you've got, you know, if you take a work context, for example, if you've got a manager looking over your shoulder all the time, you can't procrastinate. But, you know, if like the vast majority, I guess, of us here, even those of you that are in employment, and you're thinking, oh my God, I do have a manager looking over my shoulder. Actually, you are still largely, like I am, left up to manage things for yourself and how you do them. And when you have that opportunity, and equally when you are trying to deal with very often boring admin tasks, or alternatively, complex anxiety-provoking issues and problems that we have with clients, you know, it's not surprising that we get drawn to procrastinating. And that's, yeah, and it's just very effective very quickly, unfortunately. That's what makes it so addictive.
It's interesting how much and whether procrastination increased or decreased with many people working from home now rather than going to the
Very
office.
interesting question indeed. And certainly there are some employment reports that are coming through, which I was initially quite skeptical about, but which the more I've read about them, I'm feeling more convinced by, which is that that productivity has dropped in working from home. And I suspect, I mean, I've got no evidence for this, but I suspect it is because it is easier to procrastinate at home. I think there's other things as well. I think there's higher levels of distraction, which play into it. But yeah, there's that, it's that lack of structure.
Yeah.
You know?
Boundaries as well. Joanna's written a very interesting and long comment. I don't know if she wants to probably say it or happy for me to read it. Joanna? Probably happy for me to read it. Is procrastination a condition of our times? I'm struck by how many people struggle with this nowadays, and I wonder if it's something to do with how our society functions in this digital age. Is procrastination not partly a result of the sheer amount of choice and options in relation to virtually every sphere of life that we have nowadays and the overload of information? Everything is so tempting and we are bombarded with opportunities which make it difficult to prioritize and filter out what we really want and need to do.
Well, the brief answer is yes. I think, you know, let's just remember that the vast majority of what we are bombarded with is a product of opportunity and also people largely wanting to sell us things. And, you know, the first thing to say is, again, we are living in an environment which is less regulated these days than it was, for example, even 50 years ago. And that we are, you know, we are left, it's sold to us as a benefit, but we are substantially more left to organize our own time and our own environment in terms of the work that we actually do. But the downside of that is we have more opportunity to choose. And unfortunately, we live in an environment where immediacy, which is, I hope you've already gathered, one of the things that makes procrastination so powerful is the immediate effect it can have in terms of taking away anxiety or boredom. Immediacy is a central component part of the world that we actually live in. You know, I'm sitting here now and I have multiple stimulation around me. I've got a TV screen. I'm obviously not going to turn the TV screen while you guys are here, but I've got a TV screen next to me. I've got a laptop screen in front of me. I would probably find, if I was to go downstairs in the hotel, I'm going to pass different leaflets that are around. I've got various places that are calling me to them to do things, and you know, all these things are distractions. Which
don't forget your mobile phone.
And don't forget my mobile phone, of course. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, the very mention of it makes me feel anxious. I've not looked at it for nearly an hour.
Thank you. I'm sort of trying to bring it to a close. Graham is asking whether there is a linkage between hoarding and procrastination, and it gives me the opportunity to say we have a separate module on hoarding, and we will reflect upon that there. And a very nice.
Can I just say briefly, you're right, there is a relationship.
Yes, it is. Actually, they're all, the more we talk about these different conditions, the more we discover that they are actually linked to each other. Very nice comments from people who are saying, thank you, Paul, for missing part of the party for us. And we'll let you go. And thank you very much, guys. We're meeting next week, and I am not ready to say what we're doing. And actually, next week is 16th of September, and we will be doing live single session demonstration with Professor Wendy Dryden. If you've been to some before, you know that they are just wondrous experiences to behold. So please come on the 16th. And if somebody has a problem which they want to present to Professor Wendy Dryden and work on it with him, please write to me or just write to me during that meeting, because it will be live demonstration with a client from the group. So Professor Dryden won't be prepared for it at all. So see you next week. For now, you can unmute yourself, say your goodbyes and thank yous. And thank you very much, Paul, again, for giving your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Nigeria.
Thank you so much.